Hello and welcome to yet another edition of your weekly international current affairs program, Globe Watch from the Cameroon Radio Television with me, Charles Ebune, Ed from the Starland Hotel here in Yaoundé, Cameroon. 25 years ago, the Clinton administration's African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, was seen as one of the biggest economic policies to increase African goods and markets in the United States, the world's largest economy. But plus years on, the economic environment has changed with the introduction of the African Continental Free Trade Area, seen as the largest and biggest single economic bloc in the world, with a market space of plus 1.5 billion people, expected to generate annually some $3 trillion. But making businesses in Africa easier has not been an easy task. Of the world's plus 11,000 think tanks, one of its leaders is my guest today, talking about business facilitation on the continent and how we can maximize profits in an environment which is becoming more and more economically difficult. Barrister Albert Agha Ngwana, welcome to Globe Watch.
Thank you very much.
It is estimated that Africa needs, in terms of investment, between $150 and $170 billion yearly to meet the Sustainable Development Goals when it comes to its infrastructural development. What is the kind of investment environment you see on the continent today?
Well, to tell you the truth, it could be 1 trillion. For me, I think it doesn't matter at all. I believe that investment in infrastructure is an investment that pays daily. Movement and flow of goods and services to market or from one point to the other is what makes business flow. And that is a crucial investment. It's only in Africa that we see that as a burden. But each country should make those investments and make it a part of its development program. Okay, so whatever the size of that investment is, whether it's 170, 300, that shows you progress in the country. An economy like the US makes trillions of dollars in infrastructural development yearly. So why do we think that the whole continent of Africa, much bigger than the United States of America, should not invest that much? I believe the opportunity is there because Africa is a very rich continent that is only going to go bigger and richer, that this must be a crucial part of our development process.
And if you look at the development process, what are the key areas do you think the investments should be done now?
I believe, as you said originally, infrastructure is very important because you cannot go anywhere without good infrastructure, the congestion of the country and whatnot. I believe especially investment in what our economies of scale, like we have agriculture. Agriculture is very important investment. I believe that the ecosystem itself must be developed. African banks are not have too much liquidity, which for me means that the banks are not working right. In a proper economy, 60% of the bank's funds should be reserved to doing banking business, which is serving the banking community.
And when you speak on that is with possibly authority that you talk because you are a lawyer, a commercial lawyer, a financial lawyer dealing with transactions. Let's speak an element like energy. We need roughly $25 billion to inject to reduce energy poverty on the continent. Roughly about 650 million people on the continent do not have access to power. There was at one moment Power Africa initiative of the Obama administration to power roughly 50 million homes on the continent. You recently saw in East Africa mission 300 million to slice down the energy inaccessibility rate on the continent. When you look at an area like energy, do you think it is critical to fast track or leapfrog the development of the continent?
believe energy is very important as infrastructure, those for industrialization purposes, and for basic living conditions of the citizens. Those are not even arguable things to discuss, in the sense that
variables.
Those are variables. You know, every citizen must have access to light, be able to move goods. We should be able to move goods from point to point. The cost of industrialization should not be so high because of no power, all those things. So I believe that a direction towards a PPP movement,
public-private partnerships.
Public-private partnership is very important for Africa, okay? Because then we are really capitalizing the market and making sure that we give services to people according to their true value. You understand? So there's no dependency on how it should go, but we're doing what we should be doing. That's,
you have about 25 years of financial services experience on the continent, which simply means that you have seen how the business theatrics of the continent are evolving. The African Continental Free Trade Area is the biggest of all the initiatives that have been taken. You, as a business lawyer with huge footprints on the continent, working from Washington and operating in African countries, and we'll enter into that in a moment. How do you qualify the African Continental Free Trade Area in our economic system?
I believe that's the best thing that could happen to Africa. When two countries can value the economies of scale and exchange, and then you start seeing the proper flow of goods without any kinds of obstructions, we're going to have a lot of solutions for the continent. You know, there will be lesser need for different kinds of migration. Value added will be done right in the continent itself. The obstructions of free flow will not be involved, and we will get a lot of benefits from other countries that are doing well. So there's a lot of benefit to that, and it's a great movement.
When you see the way it is being implemented today with the pilot phase involving 8 countries, Cameroon concerned, and the setting up of the Secretariat from Ghana, a country that you know so well, do you think that the Secretariat is really taking the right measures to streamline the workability of this process?
Seeing that is a 2065 project, I mean, the goal is to reach...
The 2063 agenda.
2063 agenda, sorry, to reach that goal in that time. I think, you know, the way it is going, I mean, Cameroon and the other countries chosen are very strategic. You know, Cameroon is Central Africa. We all know that is the #1 economy in Central Africa. I just think that implementation is going the right way, but I don't think it is going fast enough, in my opinion.
Now let's talk about the roughly 11,000 think tanks which exist in the world. And one of them is yours, which is AFEL, dealing with financial facilitation on the continent. What does it entail, and when did you start it?
Well, we started AFEL in 2001. And it came from a simple thing. First of all, AFEL stands for Assisting Facilitating Trade, Entrepreneurship, and Life. So Africa was our business. You understand? And we saw the problems of Africa as our business. So the point is that Africa has a lot of problems, and they have to be dealt with on a strategic level. Normally, governments should all have national economic councils directing this, channeling these countries, and making sure that we meet our objectives. You understand? Nigeria had a National Economic Council during the Obasanjo Atiku time, changed totally the economy. They became the first economy in Africa. I believe these national economic councils are very crucial for the development of Africa. You know, and we started this seeing that Africa has a lot of problems, on the financial side especially, that we can participate fully in this development. And we went all over Africa with the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. We saw industrialization in Africa as the biggest solution for Africa's eradication of poverty. And that's how we drove ourselves for 25 years.
Nearly 25 years on of existence, what can you say is your track record of facilitating trade on the continent, or if you like, business?
Well, I'll tell you something. When we started, wherever we went and we were trying to implement, they were telling us where were our bosses. Basically, where the Europeans or the American whites that were accompanying us to do business. But today in Africa, out of our financial engineering has become a common term in the business community. People are talking about financial engineering left, right, center. Whereas 25 years ago, it was a mystery. It was even like you were talking about some kind of magic. But today I've seen a lot of progress. And that is a big track record, that you have a lot of people who are trying to do what you do. And we think that makes a big difference. And also I wanted to add, the United States is a service economy, where the service industry controls like 60% of the United States economy. That is not reflected anywhere else that is developing. In Africa, one of the biggest appreciated areas is the service industry. And that has to be given proper value for proper development and industrialization to take place.
In economic analysis, quantitative analysis are very important to situate our audience of what we are talking about. If they had to ask you, in how many countries do you operate in Africa, with what success rate, how many companies, how many clients, how many solutions have you provided, what will you say?
I'll say we've been to most of sub-Saharan African countries, and we've done things in most of sub-Saharan countries, participated in the economy in one way or the other. And so the clients are governments and the private sector. The countries where we can work with the government and have success, and the countries where we work only with the private sector. So from our perspective, we've covered the sub-Saharan African market that we cover, whether it's from Kenya to Mozambique, South Africa, Guinea-Bissau, wherever. And our aim, since Africa's problems, our market basically, we believe that we've gotten a good track record and good success in doing so.
When I look at your company data, you claim that you have plus 216 clients. I presume that they should be companies, governments, and whatsoever, that you have provided plus 40 solutions to enabling, facilitating business on the continent. What kind of services do you offer critically? At what moment I saw you in Togo?
Well, in Togo, we're called in, basically, let me put it this way. We're called to fulfill not the dreams, the objectives of a client or a government, client be they government or businesses. So in Togo, we're called in to do housing and hospital of reference and whatnot. We go in there, we propose a turnkey delivery service. That means that we give you everything you need to operate. Sometimes you take sometimes you take the full package. But our job is to provide you all the solutions for you to move forward. We've done this in Nigeria, where we work with Transcorp, we work with Orient Petroleum Resources. We cover pretty much a large scope of industries, whether from agriculture to oil and gas to communications. And what we do is provide turnkey delivery services. So it depends on the client. In Cameroon here, we've tried with providing infrastructural solutions. And we're still doing infrastructural solutions in Cameroon. So I believe it depends on the client. It depends on what we're presented with. Then we come in and then provide the solution.
Of course, and let me just land in Cameroon. Specifically, what are the current projects you are working on in a country like Cameroon?
In Cameroon, we're working on a monorail project, to decongest Yaoundé and Douala. All right. We've pretty much captured the whole environment. Then you have to do what is called the government relations part, which is very essential in Cameroon. We're working on a road, Edea Dizange Mwankoyoyo, which we've been working. We've provided them solutions and we're waiting for their reaction. We're working with the Port of Kribi. And also we're working with providing solutions, railway solutions. In agriculture, we're doing transformation units. You understand, for banana, plantain, and so basically, we have a portfolio of projects in Cameroon which makes it very important to us.
You probably should not be doing this alone in a world where partnerships are very key. Who are some of the people or companies you partner with to mainstream your businesses?
Thank you for talking about that. I'll go back to this African trade, African free area, African Continental free trade area. Well, you know, an occurrence happened. You know, we look at the problems of Africa as our business. You know, in 2014, when my father passed, I decided that I was going to focus on Cameroon. And, you know, so for 8 years, I didn't go to a place like Nigeria that I used to go maybe 12 times a year.
Okay.
From the US or from any perspective.
Okay.
And then one day, like 9 years after, I was watching TV and I saw this old man talking about the African Continental free trade area. And very passionate, talking about cross-border trade and whatnot. And I found it very interesting. And annoying at the same time. Because, you know, that's what we were doing, and it was so frustrating. And this old man happened to be the former president, Olusegun Obasanjo. So I flew to Nigeria for a first time after a long period, and I gave him a concept paper on on this idea that it is impossible for a man to be talking. He's the first farmer in Nigeria, in Africa. It is impossible for the first farmer in Africa to be talking about cross-border African culture when he doesn't have a presence in Cameroon. You know, and I was wondering how I could benefit from this situation, or Cameroon could benefit, or Nigerians could benefit, when the first farmer was not present in Cameroon. So he took it, he looked at it, he laughed, and he called me.
Of course, President Obasanjo is a champion of cross-African trade.
Yes, so he laughed, called me, and then decided to partner with me on doing business with Cameroon, starting Cameroon and then globally. So what we've been doing is that focusing on the port of Kribi and doing investments. He has decided to bring in $650 million of investment into Cameroon. All right, and bring in partners that will invest more, but through the port of Kribi. Because it's a deep sea port that is already doing business, 80% of its business with Nigeria. And that's how this cross-border trading, that's our start of cross-border with our direct neighbor. And then we move forward, you know, basically.
You have been doing business on the continent with plus 20 years experience. Alongside, you are a lawyer. When you look at our legal environment of judicial security, doing business on the continent, what do you think are some of the hurdles that maybe keep investors away?
Well, you know, as a lawyer, as an international lawyer, going to every country, what you look at first of all is the security of the investment, the environment. You know, I believe in our own environment, there's a lot of work to be done with regards to securing investments. You know, there has to be a lot of law reform in this in Cameroon, especially to protect the investment of the foreign investor. Because the legal system is such that if I invest, I have to be able to, if somebody does me wrong, go to court and get justice. We have to avoid a lot of weaknesses in the system that permit the wrong party to suffer. And that is a way that drives away international business. So I believe in Cameroon in particular, that there has to be a lot of reform in that area. But it will come with this African trade and African Continental trade area, you know.
The common tariff system that is put in place is maybe progressively going to solve that. Before the interview comes to end, one of your key features in life has been fostering businesses between the United States and Africa. By the way, the headquarters of your organization is based in Washington, D.C. How do you see U.S.-Africa investment today, especially since the last U.S.-Africa summit?
Well, look, listen, I think that the world economic order is going to change. Africa is the battleground for future investment. Let's not be fooled. Everybody knows that this is the richest continent. The United States is aware. The United States has been battered by their own policies in Africa. I believe that with the new changes in laws in the United States, we're going to see an aggressive drive from the United States to Africa. They talk about rare earth. Africa has more rare earth than anybody else. Talk about any kind of resources Africa does. Everybody's aware. So Africa has become the battleground of the big economies. And we're going to see a situation where Africa is going to be invaded, submerged with investments. We are the ones to now secure our investments, secure our land and our assets. So that's where I see this going.
One but last question. Of course, you watch news from Washington today. You see the economic changes brought in by the Trump administration, a lot of tariffs to redefine everything. When you look at such mercantilistic policies, or if you like, call them trade policies brought in by the current administration, are you worried by them? Are you somehow perplexed?
Well, in terms of Africa, our contribution to the U.S. economy is so minute, in the sense that it is the oil and gas sector that, if there's anybody who will suffer, will be the one suffering. But these laws generally do not affect that sector.
Okay.
What I see is that, the U.S. becoming more nationalistic, protectionist. I believe that it can only affect the U.S. Dealings with big economies. I don't think that it is obvious. Of course, it's of a personal interest kind of situation. As foreign, you know very well that they're basically giving policies that protect America.
Okay.
You understand? I don't know if it's for the best of America, but I think for Africa, our future is looking very bright, because now all eyes have to be turned to where they get new alliances and whatnot, where they get the goods and services, where they get the minerals, and how they manage this Africa that is booming.
And with a booming Africa, let us end the interview. As I said, you have huge experiences on trade facilitation, access to trade activities on the continent, counseling as a law firm owner. If you had to give advice to African governments on how to better the economic environment on the continent, especially for an increase in cross-border trade, what will you provide as a recipe?
So for one, they have to provide securities for foreign investment when they come in. Number two, I believe that the banking system has to be properly regulated, without a doubt.
Okay.
But also, I believe that we have to create the enabling environment by investing in our entrepreneurs. There are many, we're rampant with entrepreneurs. Put the entrepreneurs in a position where they can benefit from these foreign direct investments that are coming, so that it's a win-win situation for both parties.
And with that, we end the interview. Barrister Albert Agha Ngwana, thank you very much indeed for being my guest on Globe Watch.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Let's talk about the young people, for whom possibly your mandate is of greatest concern. About 450 million of them exist in the continent. Nearly 50 million of them enter the job market each year, of the roughly 500 million people employed on the continent. This is a tech-savvy generation. Is using technology to solve the many problems Africa is going through part of your agenda at the African Development Bank?
When you said this is the last question, I thought you were going to ask me about football. I come from Zambia and I've long admired Cameroon and the soccer that we played together. But I will use the question about youth to come back to football. The young people on this continent are fascinating. As part of this campaign, I've traveled...
Their greatest Cameroonian fans in East Africa is either Samuel Eto'o or Andre Onana. You can go ahead.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when it comes to Zambia, it's Kalusha Bwalia. So
absolutely, we are all aware of that.
We're all in good hands.
Yeah.
But the reality is, look, the people I've been meeting on this campaign are fascinating. And as a deliberate effort, whenever I visit a country, I try and find young people who are involved in the creative arts or they're involved in business. I spend 2 to 3 hours just listening to them. And in every single situation, I've been blown away by what they're doing. With each other, with technology, the innovations they have to cross borders faster, they're amazing. And I think the one thing that I am committed to doing at the African Development Bank is having a youth council that gives them a platform to participate in the development of our continent with a direct ear to the president and the leadership of the institution. I don't want to second guess them. There are certain things that we can do really well, because getting young people involved in development is not a one-off initiative. It's a long-term commitment. It starts with education, it starts with health. It's about making sure that our institutions, our top-notch universities, I want to make sure that the university here has internships with every African Development Bank office across the continent. Because what often is missing for our young people is not that they don't have the ideas, but they haven't been exposed to the language of development. So if I can take the best economist or the best health scientist and say every year we will take 5 for 3 months, come into the African Development Bank, you do that every year for the next 5 years. You will have a generation of young people who are not only entrepreneurial in business,
but have been capacitated.
But have the capacity, have the language to give some of us people the advice in a language we understand. And that's the role of the African Development. But I'm really optimistic about our young people. They will solve problems that we have been talking about for years and years. They will get to implementation because they are impatient, and I welcome that, and I look forward to working with them directly for the sake of our continent.